White male, kicked pregnant. Black woman on flight. 5 minutes later, her husband called off the flight. Some of us are trying to sleep. That was the first thing Brett Calloway said. Not the last, not the worst, just the first. His shoe connected with her ribs before anyone on that plane understood what they were watching. 1 second, Nadia Okafor was sitting in seat 17, B31 weeks pregnant, both hands resting on the curve of her belly, the way pregnant women do without thinking about it. Not because something was wrong, just because the baby was there and the touch was a kind of conversation, a hello, a reassurance. I see you. I am here. The next second, she was folding sideways, her left arm flying out her breath, leaving her body in a sound that was not quite a scream. It was something worse. The involuntary cry a person makes when their body absorbs a shock before the brain has time to process it. Pure biology. Pure pain. Her hands flew to her belly the instant the sound left her lips. Brett Calloway did not step back. He stood over her. One hand loose at his side, his jaw set, his eyes moving over her the way a man looks at something he has decided is in his way, and he looked down at her with an expression that said, clearly, without words, that he would do it again if he wanted to. The cabin did not erupt. It did something worse. It went absolutely, completely, devastatingly silent. 200 people suspended in that particular airless moment when something happens that the human brain refuses to categorize immediately because the category is too ugly to reach for. Drinks sat untouched. Tablets went dark. A child near the front of the plane had been laughing at something on a screen 30 seconds earlier. She was not laughing now. What happened in the next 5 minutes would divert that flight and one man's freedom and force an airline to look at itself in a mirror it had been avoiding for a very long time. If you have never heard this story before, stay right here until the very end. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell and drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels, because it deserves to travel far. Condor Airways. Flight 1847 had pushed back from Gate C-14 at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 8:12 in the morning. Destination, John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York. Scheduled flight time, 3 hours and 42 minutes. The weather was clean. The tailwind was favorable. The plane, a Boeing 737, was operating exactly as designed. Routine, that was the word for it. The precise, unremarkable routine of a flight that happens 100 times a day between Atlanta and New York, full of people who have done this flight before and expect to do it again, and have already mentally arrived at their destinations before the wheels have left the ground. Nothing about the morning of October 14th announced itself as the day it was. Not the low, gray light over the runway. Not the particular quiet of a cabin at 6:47 a.m., that specific pre-flight silence of people settling into their seats and pulling out their headphones and making the small negotiations with armrests and overhead bins that govern the first 10 minutes of any flight. Not the smell of stale recycled air and someone's coffee and the faint trace of industrial cleaning product that means you are on an airplane and not anywhere else. Nothing said, pay attention. Something is about to happen here that will matter. But it did. And when it did, the 28 seconds that followed would be watched by over 2 million people before the plane touched the ground. Would be discussed in a federal courtroom. Would change the career of a man who thought he was having a bad travel day and the life of a woman who was simply trying to get to her mother's house in time for a baby shower. 28 seconds. That was all it took. The silence in that cabin after the kick lasted only a few seconds in real time. But for Nadia Okafor, sitting sideways in her seat with both hands pressed to her belly and her breath coming in careful, measured pulls, it lasted much longer. It lasted the way hard things last. In the body, in the bones, in the place where a person stores the things they will carry for the rest of their lives. Her husband was already on his feet. His name was Marcus Okafor, and nobody on that plane yet understood who Marcus Okafor was. They were about to find out. Nadia Okafor did not look like a woman anyone needed to take seriously. That was, of course, the point. Dark leggings, an oversized navy top soft cotton, washed enough times to have lost its shape in a comfortable way. White sneakers, well worn, the kind a person buys for comfort and keeps for years. One carry-on bag, black mid-size practical, no designer logo, no jewelry except her wedding ring, which was beautiful but not loud about it, no assistant trailing behind her, no entourage, no visible signal of anything except a woman in her third trimester who had been up since 4:30 in the morning and was trying to get to New York. She was 34 years old. She had grown up in Baltimore, second-generation Nigerian-American, the daughter of a nurse and an electrical engineer who had arrived in this country with 2 suitcases and a belief that hard work was a language everyone understood. She had learned early that it was not always understood, but she had also learned that the people who refused to understand it were the ones who ended up on the wrong side of the story. She was regional director of operations at a major infrastructure firm. She had built a team of 41 people from a department of 6. She had been the youngest person promoted to her role in the company's history and the first black woman to hold it. She had done all of this quietly, without announcement, in the same way she did everything by being so precisely and undeniably correct that there was no room left for argument. This morning she wore navy cotton and white sneakers, and she was going to New York to see her mother and argue about the baby shower cake, and that was all she wanted from the day. Marcus Okafor looked like a man who coached weekend soccer. Gray t-shirt, dark jeans, white socks visible above clean sneakers, a backpack slung over one shoulder, the comfortable kind canvas with 2 front pockets. He had a coffee in one hand, the large size, because they had been up since 4:30 and neither of them had slept particularly well. He moved through the boarding area the way a man moves when he is entirely comfortable and entirely uninterested in being noticed. He was 38 years old. He had grown up in Memphis, the son of a high school history teacher and a woman who ran a small catering business out of her kitchen. He had started his first company at 24 with $3,000 a business plan he had printed at the public library and a level of certainty about his own ideas that his mother called stubbornness and his eventual investors called vision. He had been wrong about a few things in those early years. He had been right about enough of them that it stopped mattering. He carried in the front pocket of his backpack a leather notebook. Dark brown, soft with age, the corners worn to something almost velvet. He had carried it for 12 years. It contained in his own handwriting notes from every significant meeting he had attended in that time. Board meetings, partnership negotiations. The kind of meetings where the notes you take become years later the record of how something was built. Nobody on the flight would have looked at that notebook and understood what it meant. There was nothing to see. Just a man with a well-used notebook and a canvas backpack who had bought the large coffee because his wife was 31 weeks pregnant and neither of them was sleeping well. That was what people saw. What people saw was not the whole story. Marcus had a way of standing close to Nadia in public spaces that was not overprotective so much as it was present. The quiet positioning of a man who understood from 38 years of living as a black man in America that the world could shift without warning. He wanted to always be within arm's reach. Not because he doubted her, because he knew the world sometimes required a witness, and he intended to be hers. "You good?" he asked, leaning toward her as they moved through the boarding line. "My back is already registering its objections," Nadia said. "We can ask for wheelchair assistance. Last time they took 40 minutes. So we walk slow." That was their marriage in 2 sentences, he offered. She pushed back gently. He adjusted without argument. They walked slow. Their seats were economy comfort row 17, extra legroom aisle and middle. Marcus had upgraded specifically because of the legroom and the aisle access. He had thought about it carefully and paid the difference out of pocket without mentioning the cost, because he thought about those things ahead of time and absorbed the small inconveniences before they reached her. Condor Airways, Flight 1847, Atlanta to JFK, a flight they had taken 14 times. Nadia had family in New York. Her mother, a Daisy, lived in Queens. Her two sisters were already planning the baby shower scheduled for 3 weeks from now. There were decorations to approve and a cake to debate. Her sister Chisholm had already sent 17 text messages about the cake flavors, and Nadia had responded to 4 of them and was saving the rest for the flight because she needed something easy and good to look forward to. This was supposed to be the easy part. She settled into her seat with the particular careful grace of a woman in her 3rd trimester navigating a narrow space, and adjusted the seatbelt below her belly, and accepted the small pillow Marcus had requested from Rosa Alvarez, the junior flight attendant, who had greeted them at the door with a quick professional smile. 3 hours and 42 minutes, Marcus said, sitting beside her. I'll sleep. You watch something. I'll use headphones. You never plug them in. I will this time. She closed her eyes. The cabin filled around them. The overhead bins opened and shut with their familiar hollow percussion. People shuffled and settled. A baby somewhere behind them was already fussing, which made Nadia open one eye and then close it again. The safety video played. The flight attendants moved through their choreography. Everything was completely ordinary. And then the man in seat 19C sat down. His name was Brett Calloway. He was 52 years old. He was traveling alone, and from the moment he dropped into that seat, he carried with him the specific energy of a man who had decided before a single thing had happened that today was going to go wrong for him. Brett Calloway was a regional sales director at a mid-sized logistics company based in Dallas. He had been in Atlanta for a 3-day business conference that had not gone the way he wanted. 2 deals he expected to close had not closed. A presentation he considered his best work had received feedback he considered ungenerous. He had eaten bad hotel food for 3 nights and slept in a bed with a mattress that held a grudge, and he was now returning to Dallas via New York for reasons involving a connecting flight that made practical sense on paper and made no emotional sense in the context of the man he currently was. He was the kind of man who had spent his career in rooms where he expected to be the most important person and had been correct often enough that he had stopped questioning the expectation. He had an expensive watch. He had the posture of a man accustomed to being listened to. He had the particular impatience of someone for whom inconvenience is always someone else's fault. He sat down in 19C, elbowed his carry-on into the overhead bin with more force than required, and sighed in a way that was meant to be heard by the people around him. The woman in 19A ignored him. The man in 19B shifted slightly away and put on noise-canceling headphones with the speed of someone who had correctly assessed the situation. For the first hour of the flight, Calloway was simply a presence. Unpleasant, contained, unremarkable. He had noise from a screen. He had a drink. He sat 2 rows behind Nadia and Marcus, and that was a fact with no meaning attached to it. The plane pushed back at 8:12. It taxied. It climbed. Atlanta fell away beneath the clouds, and they were sealed inside that particular suspended world that only exists at altitude strangers packed together in an aluminum tube, trusting each other with their lives without ever shaking hands. Nadia slept for the first 40 minutes, or tried to. Marcus had draped his jacket over her shoulders without waking her, and was working on his laptop with the contained focus of a man who gets things done on airplanes, because the altitude removes the possibility of interruption. The baby had other plans. There was movement, that internal rolling that Nadia described to her sisters as feeling like someone practicing gymnastics in a bathtub, and she shifted and resettled and eventually gave up on sleep and just rested with her eyes closed. The first patch of turbulence hit at roughly the 45-minute mark. Nothing serious. The kind that rattles the ice in your drink and makes experienced flyers grip their armrests for exactly 2 seconds before releasing them again. The seatbelt sign came on. The pilot's voice, calm, almost bored, advising passengers to remain seated. Nadia pressed her hand to her belly. The baby kicked. She breathed out. "You okay?" Marcus had already lowered his tray table. "Fine. Baby's just restless. She gets that from you. We don't know it's a she." "I know." Something passed between them in that moment. The private shorthand of 2 people who have been reading each other for years. She almost said something else. She was about to. And then the voice came from 2 rows behind. "Can you keep it down?" It was clipped, directed, aimed with the precision of someone who had been looking for a reason. Marcus turned first. Nadia turned a moment later more slowly. Brett Calloway was staring directly at their row. His jaw was tight. His eyes had the quality of a man who had appointed himself the arbiter of everyone's comfort. "Sorry," Marcus said. The talking Calloway said, "Some of us are trying to sleep." Marcus looked at him. A long, measured look. "We were having a quiet conversation. It wasn't quiet enough." A beat. The kind where 100 responses present themselves and a person chooses. "Okay," Marcus said. "We'll keep it down." He turned forward. Nadia was already facing ahead, her expression neutral in the practiced way of a black woman who has trained herself to be neutral in moments that deserve anger. "Let it go," she said softly. "I did," Marcus said. Neither of them fully believed it. The next 30 minutes passed without incident. Nadia accepted water from Rosa Alvarez, who had an efficient warmth about her that made you feel acknowledged without being performed at. Marcus worked. The turbulence faded. The baby settled. And then Nadia needed to use the restroom. In the 3rd trimester, this is not a dramatic event. It is a physical fact that occurs frequently and requires navigation. She unbuckled carefully. Marcus stood to let her out. She moved into the aisle, one hand on the headrest for balance, and made her way toward the back of the plane. She had to pass row 19. Calloway's bag was partially in the aisle, not fully blocking it, but enough that Nadia, navigating with the wide-based, careful walk of a woman whose center of gravity has shifted significantly, had to angle herself to get past. "Excuse me," she said. Polite, automatic, the kind of courtesy that costs nothing and expects nothing back. Calloway looked up and said nothing. He did not move the bag. She squeezed past, made it to the lavatory, did what she needed to do, stood for 30 seconds at the tiny sink and let herself breathe because the small room gave her a moment of privacy, and her lower back was aching and she had learned to use small moments of privacy when she found them. When she came back, Calloway had shifted in his seat. He was now angled slightly into the aisle shoulder, forward legs extended in a posture that read as casual and deliberate at the same time. She moved to pass him, one hand on the headrest ahead of her. "Excuse me," she said again, because that was who she was. Calloway looked directly at her. And then he said something, low enough that the passengers 2 rows forward couldn't hear it clearly. But Nadia heard every word, and the 2 passengers on either side of Calloway heard enough of it. Her face changed by exactly 1 degree. She did not stop walking. She made her way back to row 17 and settled into her seat with the deliberate calm of someone who has made a decision about how to respond to something terrible. She did not look back. Marcus watched her face. "What happened?" "Nothing." "Nadia." She looked at him. Her eyes were steady, but her jaw was tight. "He said something." "What did he say?" She shook her head. "I don't want to repeat it." Marcus went very still. the stillness of a man who has learned to hold himself in place when everything in him wants to move. She told him, not because he pressured her, because she trusted him, and keeping it inside felt worse than sharing it. What Calloway had said was not about the pregnancy. It was about her, about the category he had placed her in without knowing a single fact about her except what she looked like. The specific kind of sentence designed to wound without being precise enough to be legally actionable. The kind of sentence that certain men have used their entire lives as a tool because they have learned that the people they use it on often stay quiet. Marcus flagged Rosa Alvarez as she passed. He spoke to her quietly. He described both incidents. He watched Rosa's expression shift, a slight tightening at the corners of her eyes. A careful professional composure reassembled over genuine reaction. Rosa nodded and said she would address it. She went to row 19. From row 17, Marcus watched her lean down and speak to Calloway. He watched Calloway's response, the dismissive wave, the shrug. The few words delivered with the bored confidence of a man who has been spoken to by people in uniforms before and has learned that nothing actually happens afterward. Rosa returned. I've spoken with him. He says he didn't say anything offensive. I've reminded him of the code of conduct. And if he does it again, Rosa paused, I'll escalate to our senior flight attendant. Marcus looked at her for exactly 1 second longer than was comfortable. Thank you, he said. He sat back down. Nadia was already leaning slightly forward, rubbing slow circles at her lower back with one elbow on the tray table, the quiet management of discomfort she had been practicing for 7 months. The flight moved forward. A meal service began 2 rows ahead. A child near the front laughed at something on his tablet, the sound bright and uncomplicated in a way that almost nobody on that plane could match right now. Marcus was watching. Not obviously. He had learned long ago that obvious watching escalates things, and his job right now was to get his wife and his unborn daughter to New York without incident. But he was watching, and something in the back of his mind, quiet and persistent, was telling him that this was not over. Now, before we go any further, I want to stop and ask you something. If you were on that plane and you heard what happened, what would you have done? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know. And if this story is already getting under your skin, hit that subscribe button right now, because we are only getting started. He was right. It was not over. 40 minutes later, the flight hit its second patch of turbulence. This one was sharper, the kind that pulls a small collective gasp from a cabin. Drinks sloshed. Magazines fluttered. The overhead bin locks rattled in their casings. The seatbelt sign came on. The pilot's voice. Remain seated. Nadia gripped the armrest. The baby moved hard and sudden a strong internal rolling that made her breath catch. Marcus's hand covered hers immediately. I'm fine, she said. I know you are. The turbulence lasted 90 seconds and then smoothed out. The cabin exhaled. The flight attendants who had braced in their jump seats stood and resumed their movements. Normal reasserted itself, and then Nadia shifted in her seat. She was reaching behind her to readjust the small pillow at her lower back, angling her body the way a pregnant woman in an economy seat must constantly adjust and readjust, and in the process, her elbow pressed briefly against the back of her own seat. A single, inadvertent movement. The kind that happens on airplanes 1,000 times a flight. Nobody in the seats around her noticed, but Brett Calloway, 2 rows back, had been watching. And he had apparently decided that this was the moment he had been waiting for. He stood up. In a full airplane with the seatbelt sign illuminated, a person standing is conspicuous. Heads turned. Rosa 2 rows forward with a trash collection bag looked up. Diane Weston in seat 18. A, who had been watching the entire scene with the quiet pleasure of someone who shares a worldview but is too polished to voice it herself, straightened slightly. Calloway stepped into the aisle. He moved forward. He stopped at row 17. He was standing over Nadia. "You've been doing that the entire flight," he said. His voice was no longer low. It was clear, sharp, designed to be heard. "Moving around, making noise, disturbing every single person near you." Nadia looked up at him. Calm, steady. "Sir, I would ask that you return to your seat. I'll go back when I'm finished saying what I have to say. Then I'll ask the flight attendant to assist you." She held his gaze. She did not flinch. Marcus had already turned fully around in his seat. "Back up. She asked you to step back. I'm not talking to you. You are, now." Marcus's voice was controlled in a way that sounded to anyone listening almost like quiet. "Step back, right now." Rosa was already moving toward them from the galley. Another flight attendant, a young man named Kevin, appeared from the rear. Calloway looked at Marcus with an expression that Nadia would later describe in her written statement as contemptuous, as though the idea of being told what to do by Marcus was something he found almost amusing, as though the instruction came from a source he had decided before a single word was spoken did not have the authority to give it. He turned back to Nadia, and he kicked her. It was not an accident. There are accidents on airplanes, elbows connecting in armrest negotiations, bags swinging off overhead bins, feet tangling in narrow aisles. These things happen in the compressed physical reality of a metal tube moving at 600 miles an hour, 30,000 feet above the earth. This was not that. This was deliberate. His foot pulled back. His body weighted forward. The motion of a man who made a decision and executed it. His shoe connected with Nadia's left side just below the ribs. The force of it rocked her sideways in her seat. Her right arm flew out. Her left hand and then immediately both hands went to her belly with the reflexive speed of a body acting before thought. The sound she made was not a scream. It was a cry, involuntary, wrenched from somewhere below her voice, the kind a body produces when it absorbs impact before the brain has processed what is happening. 1 second. The entire cabin heard it. And then the silence came. Not the brief pause silence of a small surprise. The heavy, pressurized, total silence of 200 people who have just witnessed something that their minds are still refusing to categorize. It sat on the cabin like a physical thing. It pressed down on every row, every aisle, every seat. The baby who had been crying near the front made no sound. The man who had been typing on his laptop stopped typing. The woman doing a crossword puzzle in seat 16. B closed the book and did not open it again. Nadia's hands were on her belly. Her eyes were wide. Her breath was coming in careful, measured pulls. The deliberate breathing of a woman who is monitoring her own body in real time and needs the information and cannot afford to panic. Victor Suarez in seat 18. A had his phone up before Calloway's foot had fully landed. He was a high school football coach from Houston. He had been watching the situation build for 40 minutes, with the patient, experienced eye of a man who has spent 20 years reading the energy in rooms where things are about to go wrong. He had pressed record quietly without drawing attention, his phone angled forward from his window seat. He had the kick. He had the approach. He had Calloway's face, before and after. The after was almost worse than the before, because after Calloway's shoe connected, his expression did not become horror. It did not become remorse. It did not even cycle through the usual human machinery of regret or shock. It was something closer and colder to the expression of a man who has done what he intended and is now simply waiting to see what the response will be. Marcus was on his feet. He did not touch Brett Calloway. He did not need to. He placed his body between Calloway and his wife with a precision that was almost surgical. Close enough that Calloway instinctively stepped back. Close enough that every person watching understood the protection being offered. But Marcus's hands were open at his sides. Visible. Still. Because Marcus Okafor had spent his entire adult life being a black man in America, and he understood with perfect and practiced clarity what a black man could and could not do in this precise moment without becoming the headline, without giving anyone any official, any report, any narrative, anything to use against him. He had been given that understanding by life itself, by experience, by watching other men learn the same lesson in more costly ways. So he stood, both hands open, his body between his wife and the man who had just kicked her, and he spoke in a voice that came from somewhere below his chest. Quiet. Absolute. "Touch her again," he said. "That is the only warning you will ever get from me." Calloway opened his mouth. "Don't," Marcus said. "Just that. One word. A closed door." Rosa Alvarez had reached them. Kevin was right behind her. Calloway was already talking the reflexive verbal machinery of a man who has gone further than he planned and is now trying to rebuild the story in his favor. Justifications, denials, the words provoked and moving and disturbing landing in the cabin air and floating there finding no purchase because the cabin was not listening to him. The cabin was watching Nadia, her hands on her belly, her breath coming in careful pulls, her face carrying the terrible composure of a woman who is refusing to fall apart because she is still monitoring, still assessing, still gathering information about whether her daughter is okay, and she cannot afford the luxury of collapse until she knows. Rosa crouched beside her. "Are you okay?" Nadia looked at her. "I don't know." Those 4 words were the most frightening thing she had said all day. Not because they expressed weakness, because they expressed the honest truth of a woman who is not yet sure of the answer and has been too careful and too precise her entire life to pretend otherwise. Marcus looked at Rosa, and his expression communicated everything that his controlled voice would not. He looked at her, and she understood in an instant that this flight was no longer routine, that something had shifted fundamentally in what was happening and what was going to happen next. "I need your senior flight attendant," Marcus said. "Right now." "Of course. And I need someone with medical training to assess my wife. We have a protocol. Start it now. Not loud, not aggressive. Immovable. The voice of a man who has done the math on every possible outcome and selected the one that leaves no room for error." Kevin had guided Calloway back toward his row with the quiet authority of presence without touch. Hands off. Just positioning direction, the understanding that Calloway, for the first time since Atlanta, was going where he was told. He moved with the stunned compliance of someone who has only now begun to understand the full dimensions of what they have done. The cabin watched him go. A woman in row 15 pressed her hand over her mouth. A man near the window shook his head once slowly. Patricia Nolan in seat 16B had her arms folded and her eyes were tracking Calloway with an expression that contained no diplomacy. Diane Weston, who had enabled and smirked for 40 minutes, had gone entirely quiet. She was looking out her window at the clouds as though she had recently remembered that they existed. Nadia leaned back in her seat. Marcus sat beside her and took her hand, and she gripped it hard once before settling into a steadier hold. "She's moving," Nadia said quietly. She could feel the baby, a slow, uncertain rolling, not the strong, decisive kicks of the last few weeks, but movement, present, continued, the answer to the question she had been asking with both hands pressed to her side. Marcus closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then he opened them. "I know," he said. "I need you to stay calm," Nadia said. "I am calm. I need you to stay calm for the next hour," she said. "After that, you can be whatever you need to be." He looked at her. She was even here the most precise person he had ever known. "Okay," he said. He was already reaching for his phone. Linda Prescott arrived at row 17 within 90 seconds. She was 48 years old. 19 years in the air, and she had the unflinching authority of a person who has managed medical emergencies and mechanical failures and passenger crises at altitude, and has learned that the most valuable thing she can offer in those moments is not sympathy, but competence. She took in the scene with the efficiency of someone who has been trained to assess and act simultaneously. She looked at Nadia's hands still on her belly. She looked at Marcus's face, which was controlled in the specific way that means a great deal is being held back. She looked at Rosa positioned beside Nadia, and at the position of the seats and the distance between Nadia and row 19. She understood the shape of what had happened before Marcus said a word. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said. Marcus told her. Complete, accurate, without embellishment and without omission. The first comment during turbulence, the bag in the aisle, what Calloway had said when Nadia walked past him, the warning Rosa had delivered, the standing up during the seatbelt sign, the kick. Linda listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was still for a moment. Something moved behind her professional composure. "We have a doctor on board," she said. "I'll find her immediately." "Thank you. And the passenger." "I'll handle the passenger. I also need to speak with the captain." Linda looked at him. "Mr. Okafor, when you have a moment, after my wife is assessed." She nodded once and moved forward. Rosa stayed beside Nadia, and something had shifted in Rosa's posture. She had been professional before. She was something more than professional now. She had heard Calloway's dismissal of her warning 40 minutes earlier. She had kept walking when Diane Weston made her comment about pregnant women in economy comfort. She had chosen the path of professional distance twice in this flight, and both times the situation had gotten worse. She was done choosing that path. "I'm staying with you," she said to Nadia, "until someone with medical training gets here. I'm not moving." Nadia looked at her. "Thank you." Dr. Sandra Ruiz arrived 2 minutes later. She had been in seat 22B, an OB-GYN, traveling to a conference in New York, and she had been half asleep when the cry went through the cabin and had arrived fully awake by the time she was on her feet. She carried a small travel medical kit she kept in her carry-on, and she moved with the particular focused alertness of someone whose training has switched them into a different mode of functioning. She knelt beside Nadia, spoke quietly, asked about pain level, location, intensity, asked about fetal movement, asked about contractions. Nadia answered each question with the careful precision of a woman who needs accurate information and intends to provide it. "The baby is moving," Nadia said. "I can feel her. That's a good sign." Dr. Ruiz paused, honest. "I can't give you a full assessment here, but your vital signs look stable. The fetal movement is reassuring. The impact was to your side, below the ribs. I want to be truthful with you. You need to be evaluated by an OB at a hospital as soon as you land. The sooner the better." "How soon can we land?" Marcus said. He was already looking at Linda, who had returned to their row. And in that moment, Marcus made a decision. "I need to speak with the captain," he said again. "Not a request." Linda looked at him. 1 beat. 2. "I'll take you." While Linda walked with Marcus toward the front of the plane, Marcus stepped 3 feet away and made a phone call. The number was in his memory. It answered on the second ring. "David," Marcus said. "I need you listening." David Reeves had been Marcus's attorney for 9 years. He had been a federal prosecutor before that, for 11 years before that. He did not ask Marcus to repeat anything. He did not ask him to slow down. He listened to everything in the order it happened, and when Marcus finished, David was quiet for 4 seconds. "Don't leave that plane without a written incident report," he said. "Names of every crew member who witnessed or responded. If any passenger approaches you to offer a witness account, get their information. Record everything you can without being obvious. Do not argue. Do not make statements that read as threatening. Let them come to you. Already doing it. Marcus. A pause. The pause of a man saying what he needs to say before they get back to the law. Is Nadia okay? Marcus looked back at his wife. She was sitting with her hands on her belly and Dr. Ruiz beside her and Rosa standing in the aisle watching over her, and she was doing what she had always done in hard moments. She was keeping herself together with the specific quiet tenacity of a woman who had never once let difficulty have the last word about her. She's going to be, Marcus said. He hung up and kept walking. What Linda found when she reached the cockpit was not a captain who needed convincing. Captain James Holt had been in the air for 24 years. He had heard the incident described over the crew intercom in the minutes following the kick. He was a man of measured decisions, and he had made one already. He looked at Linda when she came through the door. A pregnant woman in my cabin was struck deliberately, Captain Holt said. She needs medical evaluation. The passenger is asking to speak with you. Send him in. Marcus stepped into the cockpit doorway. He and Captain Holt looked at each other for a moment, the specific assessment that occurs between two people deciding within seconds whether they are on the same side of something. Marcus stated the facts. Dr. Ruiz's assessment, the medical need, the timeline. He did not perform. He did not plead. He provided accurate information and then was quiet. Captain Holt nodded. He reached for the radio. Back in row 17, Nadia had taken her husband's jacket from the seat beside her and draped it over her shoulders. She was looking out the window at the clouds below them. She was breathing the way her mother had taught her to breathe through hard things. The long, slow inhale of a woman who knows that the storm is not finished, but has decided that she is still here and she is still standing, and whoever has made the mistake of underestimating her is going to find out what that means. She pressed her hand to her belly. The baby rolled, slow and deliberate and present. I know, Nadia said quietly. To her daughter. Linda Prescott came back to row 17. She looked at Nadia with an expression that had moved from professional to personal just for a moment. I want you to know Linda said that what I saw was unacceptable. I want you to know that I saw it. Nadia looked at her. Thank you for saying that out loud. Linda nodded once, tight. Then she moved back up the aisle to stand at the front of the cabin. And then over the intercom, in the calm, measured voice of 24 years in the air, Captain James Holt made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, due to an onboard security concern, this flight will be making an unscheduled stop. We apologize for the inconvenience and ask that all passengers remain seated with seatbelts fastened. The cabin erupted, not in panic, in noise, in the particular charged noise of 200 people who have just been told their plans have changed and who need immediately to process what that means and what it costs them and what is happening and why. Brett Calloway sat in 19C and stared at the seat back in front of him and said nothing. Victor Suarez unbuckled his seatbelt. Kevin, the rear flight attendant, noticed and stepped toward him immediately. Victor held up one hand in a gesture of pure transparency and said, I'm not going anywhere. I just need to speak to the husband in 17. Kevin assessed him for 1 second and gave a small nod. Victor walked forward to row 17. He stopped at the edge of the aisle and looked at Marcus and then at Nadia, and his face was doing something complicated. He was a football coach. He had seen injuries on a field. He had seen the moment when a person gets hurt and the people who care about them understand what has happened. He recognized what he was looking at. I have video, he said. The word landed like a stone dropped in still water, rings spreading outward in every direction. Marcus looked at him. What I have video? Victor said again. His voice was steady, though his hands weren't quite. When he stood up and moved toward your row, something felt wrong. I started recording. I got it. All of it. He paused. The kick. I got the kick. Nadia made a sound. Not words. Something smaller than words, something releasing. Marcus stood. He looked directly at Victor. "What's your name?" "Victor Suarez." "Houston. I coach football at Jefferson High." He said this last part the way people say their profession when they want you to understand that they are a serious person who takes serious things seriously and intends to be useful. Victor Marcus said, "Don't delete it. Don't post it yet. Can you send it directly to me right now?" "That's why I came up here," Victor said. He was already navigating to his camera roll. Within 45 seconds, the video was on Marcus's phone. He watched it once standing in the aisle. Just once. What the camera had captured, slightly shaky from Victor's window seat, angled forward at just the right degree, was not ambiguous. There was no other interpretation available. There was no angle from which it read differently. It was Brett Calloway standing up with the seatbelt sign on, moving forward with deliberate steps, positioning himself at row 17, and then the moment his foot pulling back and driving into Nadia's side with force that rocked her entire body. Her hands flying to her belly. Her cry. And Calloway's face. Before and after. The before was the face of a man who has made a decision. The after was the face of a man who is satisfied with it. Marcus locked his phone. He looked at Victor. "Thank you," he said. The weight in those two words was not social courtesy. It was the weight of a man who has just been given something that will matter in ways that extend far beyond this cabin. He called David Reeves immediately. "I have video," Marcus said. 28 seconds. Clear angle. You can see the entire incident." 2 seconds of silence. Then David's voice shifted into a different gear, faster and more direct. "Send it to me right now. Do not post it anywhere. Do not share it with the airline. Send it to me first. Already sending. Marcus." David's voice had an energy underneath it that hadn't been there before. This just became a completely different situation. "You understand what I'm telling you? Tell me anyway." Federal assault charges. This happened on a commercial aircraft in flight. That is federal jurisdiction. Assault on a pregnant woman. Video documentation. Witness testimony. The flight diversion itself. A pause. This is not a civil complaint. This is criminal. Marcus was quiet. "Are you with me?" David said. "I'm with you. When you land, you do not leave the jetway without speaking to law enforcement first. Give them your statement. Give them Victor's name as a witness. Tell them about the video. Do not let the airline manage this without law enforcement in the room. Copy." "And Marcus." A pause. How is Nadia? Marcus looked at his wife. She was watching him with the steady eyes of a woman who can read him across a distance without hearing a word of the conversation. She had her hand on her belly and Dr. Ruiz beside her, and the particular focused composure of a woman who has decided that she will not be broken by this today. "She is the strongest person I have ever met," Marcus said. He hung up and noticed Patricia Nolan standing at the edge of the aisle. Patricia Nolan from seat 16B, 61 years old. Silver hair, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She had a paperback novel in her hand that she had not opened since the kick. She had been a school principal for 23 years in Portland, Oregon, and she had spent those 23 years in the business of watching what happened when adults decided the rules did not apply to them and deciding what to do about it. She was holding a folded piece of paper. "I'm Patricia Nolan," she said. She was speaking to both of them. "I was in 16B. I saw everything from the first time he spoke to you, all of it." She extended the folded paper. "This has my full name, my phone number, and what I witnessed written out in order. I will say all of it to anyone who asks in any room they want to put me in." Marcus took the paper. He looked at it. Then he looked at her. "Thank you, Patricia." "Don't thank me," she said. "It's just the truth." She looked at Nadia's hands on her belly. Her jaw tightened. Is the baby all right? She's moving, Nadia said. That's what the doctor said to look for. Patricia nodded. She looked like she wanted to say more. Instead, she pressed her lips together and returned to her seat, and the set of her shoulders said everything else. Marcus opened the Notes app on his phone and began logging. Times, seat numbers, exact words in sequence, the name of every crew member who had responded, Victor's full name and contact information, Patricia's folded note, Dr. Ruiz's name and preliminary assessment, the flight number, the gate, the time of departure, the time of the incident. He logged it the way David had taught him to think about documentation over 9 years, not emotionally, not for effect, with the cold, useful precision of a record that will be read by people who were not present and who will need to understand exactly what happened in exactly the order it happened. Nadia watched him and said nothing. She understood what he was doing. She had always understood what he was doing, even when it looked from the outside like detachment. He was building a structure. He was standing inside it. He was holding it up with both hands. In row 19, Kevin stood positioned in the aisle beside Calloway. Calloway had been sitting in a rigid, staring quiet for several minutes. Then he spoke. "This is ridiculous." Not loudly, to no one specific, the way a man speaks when he wants to be heard but does not want to be directly engaged with. Kevin said nothing. "Diverting a flight," Calloway continued. "Over nothing." Kevin looked at him. "Sir, I'd encourage you to wait and speak with law enforcement when we land." Calloway looked at Kevin sharply. "Law enforcement?" "Yes, sir." Something moved across Calloway's face. Not guilt. Not exactly. It was recalibration. The rapid internal adjustment of a man who has only now understood that the situation he thought he was in is not the situation he is actually in. He had boarded this flight as a man who was having a bad week. He had stood up in the aisle as a man exercising a grievance. He had sat back down as something else entirely, though he had not yet fully assembled the shape of what that something else was. "I want to make a statement," Calloway said. "I want it on record that what happened was provoked." Kevin looked at him with the flat professional composure of a man who has been trained not to react. "I'll let the senior flight attendant know you'd like to make a statement when we land." "It was provoked," Calloway said again, and this time his voice had something underneath the bristle and the entitlement. Something quieter. The first faint note of a frequency that was not anger and not arrogance, and was something closer and much less comfortable to fear. Kevin heard it. He said nothing. He turned back to face forward. He stood in the aisle and waited for the wheels to hit the ground. If you are watching this and you have ever stood in an aisle like Kevin did, knowing the right thing and choosing it, this story is for you too. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. We are almost to the moment that changes everything. The descent into Charlotte was quiet, not the easy quiet of a smooth flight settling toward its destination, the dense, deliberate quiet of 200 people processing something simultaneously and finding that they do not have words for it yet. Trays were stowed without being asked. Seatbacks came up without the usual crew reminder. People looked at their own hands or at the middle distance. Marcus had stopped logging and was sitting with Nadia's hand in his thumb moving slow circles across her knuckles. He was not doing it for her. He was doing it because the motion helped him stay in the place he needed to be controlled, strategic present. She understood this and let him. The plane banked slightly as it began its approach, and everyone on board felt the change in their stomachs before their minds registered what it meant. The direction was wrong for New York. The altitude was dropping at the wrong rate. Experienced flyers recognized it first, then the others. "Why are we going down?" a voice near the back said loud enough for 5 rows to hear. The child near the front started crying, the same child who had been laughing at the tablet 90 minutes earlier as though she had always known this was not going to be an ordinary flight. Mr. Okafor. Mr. Linda Prescott arrived at row 17. Her face was professional, but her voice was personal. The captain has diverted the flight to Charlotte Douglas. We'll be on the ground in approximately 31 minutes. Thank you, Marcus said. And Calloway. He has been asked to remain in his seat. Kevin is positioned in his row. She paused. We have an incident report started. I'll need formal statements from both of you before we deplane. Marcus nodded. Linda leaned forward slightly toward Nadia and said something that was just between the two of them, something quiet and direct that did not require anyone else to hear it. Nadia looked at her and nodded. The cabin murmur had grown, not louder but denser. The specific charge of a contained space full of people deciding each individually what kind of person they are going to be in the next 30 minutes. Marcus could feel it behind him without turning around. Dr. Ruiz had stayed beside Nadia through all of it, monitoring quietly. She checked Nadia's pulse again. She asked about the baby's movement. She asked about the pain level at the site of impact. Still moving, Nadia said. The pain is manageable. It's sore. That's the bruising. The ribs took the impact, not the abdomen. Dr. Ruiz looked at Nadia directly. You did everything right. You stayed calm. You monitored movement. Once we land, I want you seen by an OB within 2 hours. Not 6 hours, not tomorrow. 2 hours. We'll make it happen, Marcus said. Nadia looked out the window at the approaching landscape of North Carolina, the particular pale brown October fields giving way to the spreading suburbs of Charlotte. She was thinking about her mother. Her mother, Adeas, who had raised 2 daughters in Baltimore after her husband died, and who had called every morning of Nadia's pregnancy at 7 a.m. without fail. Her mother, who right now was in Queens planning a baby shower with 17 text messages about cake and no idea what had happened at 30,000 feet. She was thinking about the baby shower, the decorations she hadn't approved yet, the cake she had been saving the argument about for the flight. She was thinking about how the most ordinary plan in the world can become extraordinary without warning. Marcus, she said. He looked at her. After all of this is handled. She held his gaze. We still go to New York. We will. Promise me. I promise you, he said. All of it. The decorations and the cake and your mother and all of it. She nodded once and turned back to the window. The ground was coming up. In row 19, Brett Calloway had been perfectly still for 20 minutes. The stillness of a man who has replaced defensiveness with calculation and is now running the calculation and not loving what he finds. He could feel the changed energy of the plane. He could feel the way the crew was moving, the specific purposefulness of people who know something he does not know yet. He pressed both palms flat against his thighs. His phone showed him the same thing it had been showing him for the last 15 minutes. He had not yet searched his own name. He was not sure he wanted to. Patricia Nolan from the corner of her eye was watching him. She had not said another word to anyone since she delivered her handwritten statement to Marcus. She had sat with her arms folded and her novel closed in her lap, and she had been watching Calloway with the patient, unflinching attention of a woman who has seen what happens when adults avoid accountability and has decided she will not be part of the machinery of that avoidance today. A woman's voice came across the aisle. Seat 15D. She was roughly 30, dark-haired, had been in the window seat with her headphones in for most of the flight. Her name was Isabel Mora. She worked in social work in Charlotte and was returning from visiting family in Atlanta. She had watched the entire incident from the moment Calloway stood up. "Excuse me," she said, leaning toward Nadia. "I want you to know that I saw everything, and I will tell anyone who needs to hear it exactly what happened." Nadia looked at her. "Thank you. Can I have your contact information? I was about to offer it." Isabel took out her phone. They exchanged information in the aisle of a diverted flight descending toward Charlotte. Two women who had not known each other existed 2 hours earlier. Marcus logged Isabel's name and number. Then his phone rang. A 212 area code. He answered. "Is this Marcus Okafor?" The voice was professional female rapid. "My name is Lisa Blake. I'm a producer at CNN. We've received information about an incident on Condor Airways, Flight 1847. Are you the passenger whose wife was assaulted?" Marcus went completely still. "How did you get this number? I'm not able to share that. But I can tell you we've already received footage. It's been viewed." Marcus hung up. He looked back toward Victor's seat. Victor was on his phone. His face was doing the complicated thing again, not guilty exactly, but the expression of a man who has done something and is only now fully understanding what he has set in motion. Marcus stood. He walked back to row 18. He crouched down in the aisle beside Victor's seat at eye level and spoke very quietly. "Did you post the video?" Victor looked at him. He stopped. "I sent it to my brother. I told him not to share it. He must have." Marcus closed his eyes for 3 seconds. He opened them. "Okay," he said. Not forgiving, not condemning. A man adjusting to a fact. "The video is out. Marcus, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking." "It's out now," Marcus said. He stood. "It changes the timeline, not the strategy." He went back to his seat and called David. "The video is on social media," Marcus said. David said one word under his breath. Then, "How long unknown. CNN just called me." "Okay?" David shifted gears again faster. "This changes the pace but not the position. When you land, law enforcement is first. Do not speak to any media before we talk. If anyone calls again in the next 20 minutes, 2 words, no comment. Then hang up. How bad is the spread?" A pause. "Then it's moving, Marcus. People are watching." The wheels of Condor Airways, Flight 1847, touched the ground at Charlotte Douglas at 10:47 in the morning. 200 passengers felt the familiar compression of a plane returning to its earthbound weight. The thrust reversers roared. The speed bled off. The roll toward the gate began, and Linda's voice came over the intercom firm and clear, cutting through the noise of unbuckling and shifting bags. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with seatbelts fastened until instructed otherwise. We will be meeting with officers when we arrive at the gate. We ask for your cooperation and patience." The cabin noise changed again. Different in pitch, different in weight. Not just a diverted flight. Something else. Marcus reached over and took Nadia's hand. She squeezed it once hard and exhaled. "We're okay," he said. "I know," she said. "But Marcus?" "Yeah. Make it count." The jetway connected. The door stayed closed. 2 full minutes passed where nothing happened. On a sealed aircraft, 2 minutes is an immense amount of time. People shifted. People whispered. Kevin stood at the door with his hands clasped. Rosa stood in the galley opening. Linda was on the crew intercom. Then the door opened. The first people through were not airport staff. They were 2 Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officers moving with the measured authority of law enforcement, entering a situation that has been described to them and that they have already formed a picture of. Behind them was a 3rd officer. Behind him, a man in a Condor Airways blazer. His name was Ron Becker, Condor Airways Regional VP. 53 years old. Wire-rimmed glasses, the expression of a man who has spent his career absorbing other people's problems and has arrived at this particular problem at a run. He had spoken to his COO 18 minutes ago. His COO had said 4 words: "Pull Okafor's file, Ron." Ron had pulled the file on the flight to the gate. What he found in that file had changed everything about the conversation he thought he was going to have. Ron walked toward row 17 with his hand already extended and an apology already forming. Marcus looked at the extended hand. He did not take it. "My wife needs medical attention first," Marcus said. "Then we talk." Ron's hand dropped. He recalibrated. "Of course, Mr. Okafor. We have a medical team." "Good." Marcus looked at the lead officer, a man in his late 30s named Officer Vargas. "My wife is 31 weeks pregnant. She was struck in the ribs on this flight by the passenger in seat 19C. She has been monitored by an OBGYN on board. She needs hospital evaluation within 2 hours." Officer Vargas turned and indicated to the medical technician who had come in behind him. She moved forward, immediately knelt beside Nadia, and began a quiet and efficient assessment. Marcus turned back to Ron. "I need you to understand several things," Marcus said. The same even tone he had used all morning. The tone that was not performance. The tone of a man simply providing accurate information to people who need it. "I have a video of the assault. It is currently circulating on social media. My attorney is David Reeves, and he is already on a flight to Charlotte. I want formal documentation that the passenger in seat 19C is being detained and not released before federal law enforcement reviews the evidence." Ron looked at him carefully. "Mr. Okafor, I assure you." "Ron." Marcus said his name simply without heat. "I'm not making demands. I'm giving you information so that we're working from the same picture." A pause. Then Marcus reached into the front pocket of his backpack. He took out the leather notebook. He set it on the tray table in front of him, closed. He looked at Ron. "There's something you should know," Marcus said, "before this conversation continues." He opened his phone. He did not open the video. He opened a different screen, a document, a name at the top that Ron Becker, who had spent 15 years working for Condor Airways, recognized immediately. Ron went still. Rosa Alvarez, passing behind the officers with a stack of blankets she had been collecting, caught a glimpse of the screen. She stopped walking. She stared at it for 1 full second. Then she looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back at her. "You own this airline," Rosa said. She said it very quietly. Not accusation, not wonder. Just the flat statement of a person who has just had a puzzle piece click into place. "I own 41% of it," Marcus said, "which makes me the largest single stakeholder in Condor Airways." He said it the same way he had said everything else all morning, without triumph, without theater, without the energy of a man revealing a secret he has been enjoying keeping. It was a fact. He was stating a fact. "I didn't mention it when we boarded because I wanted to see how this airline treated my wife when it thought she was simply a passenger. A woman in a navy top and white sneakers who was 31 weeks pregnant and trying to get to New York." He looked at Rosa, then at Linda, who had come forward, then at Ron. "I got my answer," he said. The silence that followed was different from the silence after the kick. That silence had been horror. This silence was something else. The specific quality of a space in which the ground has just shifted and everyone is refinding their footing. Rosa's eyes were bright. She was gripping the stack of blankets so hard her knuckles had gone pale. Linda Prescott stood very straight. Ron Becker looked like a man who had walked into a conversation he had prepared for and found a completely different one waiting. On his phone, Ron received a call. He looked at the screen. Condor Airways, COO. He answered. He listened for 20 seconds. He said, "Understood." He hung up. His face had moved through several expressions and arrived at something close to genuine distress. "Mr. Okafor," he said. "Ron." Marcus's voice was almost gentle. "Almost. My wife is being assessed right now. My attorney is in the air. Law enforcement is present. What I need from you in the next 30 minutes is the following: a written incident report from every crew member who witnessed what happened on this flight. Signed. Before anyone deplanes, the name and badge number of every officer who speaks with the passenger in 19C, and your confirmation that that passenger is not released before a federal officer has reviewed the evidence." Ron was already nodding. In row 19, a second officer was speaking with Brett Calloway. Whatever Calloway was saying, he was saying it with his hands moving the defensive gesturing of a man constructing a version of events. The passengers around him had gone very still. They watched without appearing to watch. Patricia Nolan had her arms folded and her eyes on Calloway with the expression of a woman who taught children the meaning of accountability for 23 years and is watching a man discover it for the first time. Isabel Mora in 15D had already written her contact information on a business card and was waiting to hand it to Officer Vargas. Victor Suarez sat with the weight of a man who made a complicated decision and is now living with the full dimension of it. He had pressed record when something felt wrong. He had sent the video to a brother who did not keep the confidence. The video was in the world now. The number on the screen was climbing. What Victor did not know, yet what almost no one on that plane knew, was that the video was not just spreading. It was landing. It was landing in newsrooms. It was landing on the phones of people who had something to say about it and the platforms to say it loudly. It was landing in the offices of people whose names would matter before the day was out. Marcus received a text from David. Video at 1.4 million views. 3 major news accounts have shared it. Federal statute on assault of a commercial aircraft up to 20 years. I'm 40 minutes from Charlotte. Don't sign anything. Marcus showed the text to Nadia. She read it. She looked at her husband. 1.4 million people watched him kick me, she said. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then 1.4 million people know what he did. The medical technician looked up from her assessment. Mrs. Okafor, baby's heart rate is strong and stable. Fetal movement is present. The impact site is going to bruise and you'll be sore, but what I'm seeing right now is reassuring. She paused. You need that OB evaluation. Today. Nadia closed her eyes for a full 3 seconds. Then she opened them. Okay, she said. Just that. The word of a woman giving herself permission to let the held breath out. Just for a moment. Marcus put his arm around her and she let her composure break just slightly, just at the edges. Not all the way, just enough that he could see it. She pressed her face against his shoulder for a few seconds. He held her carefully. The way you hold something that you almost lost. Ron Becker was on his phone 3 feet away, and his expression had the look of a man who has realized that no amount of customer service training prepared him for this particular morning. And somewhere at the front of the plane, Captain James Holt was filling out the diversion report. In the space marked "Reason for Diversion," he wrote without hesitation, "Passenger assaulted. Pregnant woman. Medical necessity. Immediate action required." He had been in the air for 24 years. He had made the right call. He was certain of it. David Reeves walked through the door of the Condor Airways Sky Club at Charlotte Douglas at 11:43 in the morning, 41 minutes after the flight landed. He had adjourned a deposition in Atlanta the instant Marcus called him. He had driven to Hartsfield-Jackson in 20 minutes. He had gotten on the first available flight to Charlotte in 11 more. He came through the door of the Sky Club with his briefcase in one hand and his phone in the other, and his tie still straight because David Reeves was the kind of attorney who kept his tie straight in every room, including the ones where everything was on fire. He looked at Marcus, then at Nadia, then at Marcus again. How is she? She's good, Marcus said. Baby is good. David exhaled once, full and complete. The breath of a man who has been holding it since a phone call at 30,000 feet. Then the attorney came back fully and he said, "Show me everything." They showed him everything. Linda's incident report signed before the crew deplaned, Victor's video, Patricia's handwritten statement, Isabel's business card with 4 sentences of witness testimony on the back, Dr. Ruiz's preliminary medical assessment, the medical technician's findings, every crew member name, every timestamp, every fact in the order it occurred. David went through it with the systematic precision of someone building a structure. He was quiet for 3 minutes while he read and reviewed. Then he looked up at Ron Becker, who had been standing near the window. "I need to speak with Condor's legal team," David said. "Not their PR team, not their customer service team, their legal team. Today, in this room, within the hour." Ron was already on his phone. "I also need—" David continued confirmation that the passenger from seat 19C has been formally detained by law enforcement and not issued a warning and released. Ron hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Just enough. Marcus caught it. He looked at David. David caught it too. "Ron," he said. "Is he detained?" A pause that was 2 seconds too long. The officer spoke with him at the gate. Ron said carefully. "He was issued a written notice pending further. He assaulted a pregnant woman on a federal aircraft," Marcus said. The control in his voice slipped just slightly, just enough to hear the thing underneath it. "On camera, with witnesses, and he was issued a written notice. I understand your frustration, Mr. Okafor. I'm going to need the names and badge numbers of the officers who made that decision," David said. His voice was entirely flat. Not angry. Flat. The tone of a man who has dealt with institutional failure before and knows exactly what to do with it. "And I am contacting the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of North Carolina. This is a federal matter. I intend for it to be treated as one." He was already typing on his phone. Nadia, from the couch where she had been sitting with the medical technician finishing her assessment, said quietly, "They let him go, didn't they?" It was not a question. The room went still. "We don't know that yet," David started. "You both saw Ron's face," Nadia said. She looked up. Her eyes were clear and dry and absolutely certain. "He walked off that plane with a piece of paper." Ron's expression confirmed it before he opened his mouth to speak. Marcus stood very still. David typed faster. "What happened in the next 47 minutes happened in several places simultaneously, the way consequences cascade when a stone has been dropped into still water and the rings have been spreading outward for hours. At 12:08, Calloway's employer in Dallas received a call from their communications director. Her name was Beth, and she had been watching the video spread across platforms for the last 2 hours with the specific dread of someone who recognizes a problem and cannot outrun it. She called her CEO. 4 words. "It's one of ours." The CEO was 59 years old and had spent 31 years building his company. He watched the video once. He called HR. He did not ask for a review or a process or a committee. He said, "Pull his access card. Today. Before this afternoon. Get a statement from legal on my desk in 2 hours and on our website by 4. Brett Calloway's security badge was deactivated at 12:19. At 12:31, Marcus received a text from David. Calloway's employer just suspended him. Their comms director sent a press release to 4 outlets and forgot to BCC. Word travels. At 12:44, the video hit 2 million views. At 12:51, 3 sitting members of Congress shared the video on their official accounts. 2 of them were women. One of them was the ranking member of the Transportation Committee, and the words she used were not generic. They were specific. They were about law. They were about what happens next. Patricia Nolan, who had given her formal witness statement to Officer Vargas at the gate and was now in the Charlotte airport waiting for a rebooked flight to New York, received a call from a reporter at the Associated Press. She answered it. She said exactly what she had seen in the order. She had seen it without embellishment and without omission because that was who she was and had always been. Victor Suarez, sitting in the Charlotte airport with his boarding pass for a rebooked flight to Houston, had been on the phone with his wife for 20 minutes. He had explained everything. His wife had been quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You did the right thing pressing record. You did the wrong thing telling your brother not to share it and thinking that would work." Victor had laughed. It was the first time he had laughed all morning, and it felt like something releasing. Rosa Alvarez was still on the plane finishing the post-diversion paperwork with Kevin. She had been given Linda's direct number and told that someone from corporate HR would be in contact within 24 hours. Rosa did not know what that meant. She knew what she had done. She had stayed beside Nadia from the moment the kick happened to the moment the medical technician took over. She had not moved, and she had not been asked to, and she had not offered to. She had simply decided that this was where she was supposed to be, and she had been right. And in the Condor Airways Sky Club, Nadia picked up her phone and called her mother. Her mother answered on the second ring, in the way that mothers answer when they already know. "Baby," her mother said. Just that word. The word she had been saying to Nadia for 34 years. Nadia's throat closed. "Mama," she said. "Tell me you're okay. I'm okay. Tell me my grandbaby is okay." "She's okay, Mama. She's kicking right now." She was. The baby, as though understanding that she was being discussed and wishing to confirm her presence, delivered a slow rolling movement that pressed against Nadia's palm. Nadia pressed back. The small, private conversation of a mother and daughter conducted through the wall of the world. The tears arrived without warning, not dramatic, not collapsing, just wet and quiet and necessary running down Nadia's face while her mother talked about the baby shower decorations and whether Chisholm had gone too far with the yellow theme, which she absolutely had, and whether Nadia had decided about the cake yet, which she hadn't, and whether they were still coming to New York, which they were. Marcus watched his wife cry on the phone with her mother in a cleared airport lounge in Charlotte, North Carolina, 3 hours after a man had decided she was not worth the basic courtesy of being treated like a human being. He felt something move through him, past the anger, threw it out the other side, into something colder and more permanent, something that was going to be very patient and very thorough and was going to last exactly as long as it needed to last. He picked up his phone. He dialed a number he had been thinking about since the descent. A journalist named Amber Torres, who wrote for the Washington Post, who had covered Marcus's business dealings twice in the past 3 years with accuracy and fairness, who had the specific gift of receiving a story whole before she started deciding what to do with it. She answered on the second ring. Amber Marcus said, "I have a story for you, and I want you to have it first." Amber Torres had been a journalist for 17 years. She had covered disasters and courtrooms and corporate collapses and the specific grinding machinery of American institutional failure in all of its forms. She had developed over those 17 years a finely calibrated sense for the stories that matter, not just the ones that trend, the ones that land on something true and refuse to let go. She had known Marcus Okafor for 3 years. She had covered 2 of his company transactions and, in both cases, had written exactly what happened, no more and no less, without the flattening that sometimes happens when journalists reduce complicated people to convenient narratives. When his name appeared on her screen at 12:47, she answered immediately. She listened to everything without interrupting. She had a gift for complete silence while someone spoke, for receiving information without reshaping it, for letting the story come in whole before she began deciding what it was. Marcus told her everything, from the beginning. When he finished, she was quiet for 4 seconds. "I already have the video," she said. "I've been watching it spread since this morning. I was going to call you. Then you know what it shows. Tell me what it doesn't show." So he told her that too. The first comment during turbulence. The bag in the aisle. What Calloway had said when Nadia walked past him. The way Nadia had come back to her seat with her jaw tight and her expression carefully neutral. The first complaint to Rosa and Rosa's warning that produced nothing but a shrug. The 40 minutes between the verbal incident and the kick in which a pregnant woman sat in row 17 and absorbed a slow accumulation of hostility that everyone around her could feel and that nobody had stopped. "There's a gap," Amber said, "between what the crew did and what they should have done." "I'm telling you that my wife said, 'Excuse me' to that man 3 times, Marcus said. 3 times she gave him the courtesy he had not earned, and every time she did, he treated it as permission to go further. Amber was writing. He could hear it. "What do you want from this story, Marcus?" she asked. Direct, respectful enough to ask directly. He thought about it. He had been thinking about it since before they landed. "I want his name known," Marcus said. "I want the airline's protocols examined. I want the officers who released him with a written notice to explain that decision on the record. And I want my daughter to come into this world in a place where someone has said out loud in print, in a place that lasts, that what happened to her mother was wrong. Not controversial, not complicated. Wrong." Amber stopped writing. "Say that last part again." He said it again. That's the story she said. Not just the video, not just the arrest or the lack of one. The daughter, the baby who was there. She paused. "Can I speak with Nadia?" Marcus looked across the room. Nadia had finished her call with her mother and was sitting quietly, both hands in her lap, looking at the middle distance with the focused stillness of a woman who is done processing and is now deciding what comes next. He held the phone out. "Amber Torres, Washington Post. She wants to talk to you." Nadia looked at the phone, then at Marcus. "Is she good?" "She's the best one I know," he said. Nadia took the phone. What happened in the next 20 minutes was not what Amber had expected, and Amber was not someone who was easily surprised. She had prepared for composure as a defense for carefully measured answers for the language of someone who has been coached. She got instead the unfiltered truth delivered by a woman who had decided she was done calibrating it. Nadia talked about what it costs to move through the world in a black woman's body. The arithmetic of it, the constant math of deciding how to respond to things that happen to you because of what you look like. She talked about saying "excuse me" to a man who treated her courtesy as weakness. She talked about the specific exhaustion of composure maintained in the face of hostility. And she talked about her daughter not as a symbol, not as a victim, but as a person who was coming into the world regardless of what had happened on this flight, and whose mother intended to make the world answer for something before she arrived. At the end, Nadia said one sentence that she had been composing since the plane banked toward Charlotte. "He walked off that plane today," she said, "but he will not walk away from what he did." Amber said, "Thank you, Nadia." She meant it. "Print it right," Nadia said. "I will," Amber said. At 3:18 in the afternoon, David Reeves received confirmation from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of North Carolina that a formal federal investigation had been opened into the assault on Condor Airways Flight 1847. The office had reviewed the video, the incident report, witness testimony, and the crew communications log. They had also separately received a call from a member of Congress. At 6:47, Amber's article went live on the Washington Post website. The headline read, "She said excuse me 3 times." Below it, in smaller type, the story of a pregnant woman, a diverted flight, and the moment that a nation had to look at itself. Nadia read it in the back of the car Marcus had arranged to take them to the hotel, the first piece of the evening that felt quiet enough to read anything. She read it slowly. She looked for the places where her experience had been reduced or mishandled. She found none. She handed the phone to Marcus. He read it. He handed it back. He looked at her. "She got it right," he said. Nadia nodded. She got it right. By 7 that evening, the article had been read 400,000 times. By 8, 2 more members of Congress had commented. By 9, Calloway's attorney released a statement that said his client would cooperate with investigators and maintained that the incident had been misrepresented. The statement contained no apology. The cabin had not been misrepresented. 28 seconds of video did not misrepresent itself. At 10:23 that night, Marcus was lying in the dark beside Nadia in their hotel room, one hand resting near hers when his phone vibrated 4 times. He looked at the screen. He reached for the remote. He turned the television on low enough not to wake Nadia and found the news channel. The chyron on the screen had changed from what it had been reading for the last 6 hours. It now read, Calloway arrested. FBI custody. Federal agents from the FBI's Charlotte field office had arrested Brett Calloway at his home at 10:11 p.m. under a warrant issued by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of North Carolina. The charge was federal assault on a commercial aircraft. He had been taken into custody without incident. His attorney issued a 1-sentence statement. It said nothing about remorse. Marcus turned the television off. He lay back down in the dark. He did not wake Nadia. He lay still and felt the weight of the day settle into something solid, something that would not be taken back. Not a victory, not the end of anything. Just the first step on solid ground, the kind of ground you can build on. His daughter kicked. He felt it through the mattress. I know, he said, quietly. To no one but her. The next morning, Nadia woke before Marcus. That was unusual. He was normally the one awake in the gray early hours, running through lists and calculations, while she slept with the uncomplicated depth of a woman who had decided long ago that worry was a daylight activity and had trained herself to observe that boundary. But this morning, she was the one who opened her eyes first, who lay still for a long moment listening to his breathing, who let the full weight of the previous day settle onto her chest like something physical and then slowly lift. She reached for her phone. 6:09 in the morning. 43 unread messages. She scrolled through them without opening most. Her sister Chisholm. Her sister Adana. 3 people she hadn't spoken to in years who had seen the video and felt moved to reach back across time. A message from a colleague. Several from people she didn't recognize who had found her email address through her company's website, and one that made her stop scrolling entirely. It was from a woman named Gloria Reinhold. The preview line read, 7 years ago, same man, same airline Charlotte to Atlanta. The preview cut off there. Nadia sat up. She opened the message. My name is Gloria Reinhold. 7 years ago, the same man whose name is now everywhere verbally assaulted me on a Condor Airways flight from Charlotte to Atlanta. I reported it to the airline. I was told the matter would be reviewed. It was closed without action 2 weeks later. I kept the complaint number. I kept the email chain. I kept everything. I want to help. Please contact me. Nadia read it twice. Then she put her hand on Marcus's shoulder. He was awake before she finished the motion. Read this, she said. He read it. He sat up. He read it again. Then he looked at her with the expression she recognized, the one that meant he was running calculations, assembling structure, understanding implications, before he had words for any of them yet. 7 years ago, he said. Same airline, same man. And they closed the complaint without action, Nadia said. Marcus reached for his phone. I'm calling David. It's 6:15. I know. He dialed. David answered on the second ring. I saw it, David said before Marcus could speak. She messaged the firm's website last night. I've already done a preliminary background search. Gloria Reinhold, 44, works in hospital administration in Charlotte. The 2017 complaint is real. I found the filing record. Her name is on it. A pause. The airline closed it without any documented action. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, This is a pattern. One incident is an incident, David said. Two incidents, same individual, same airline, one acted on and one buried. That is a pattern of behavior and a pattern of institutional failure. That is a very different lawsuit. I've already scheduled a call with the U.S. Attorney's Office for 8 a.m. I want you and Nadia on it. Nadia was already nodding. She had heard enough of David's voice through the phone to understand. She looked at Marcus. Something passed between them. Not just the recognition of momentum now, but something larger. The understanding that what had happened on that flight was not the isolated act of one man having a bad day. It was a piece of something older. And what they were doing, the documentation, the federal complaint, the careful building of record was not only about Brett Calloway. It had never only been about Brett Calloway. One more thing, Marcus said. Congressman Whitfield's office called my cell at 7 last night. They've been trying to reach you. He messaged me too. He sits on the House Transportation Committee. He's been trying to get aviation civil rights legislation through for 2 years. He's using this case as the catalyst. Marcus paused. He's not wrong. Set up a call. Marcus hung up and looked at his wife. She was sitting cross-legged on the hotel bed in her third trimester, phone in hand, back straight, the morning light doing nothing to dim the particular focused energy she was radiating. She looked like a woman who had slept 6 hours, survived something that would have broken most people, and woken up ready to finish what she had started. I want to talk to Gloria myself, Nadia said. Before the call, just us. He nodded. Okay. And I want to go outside today, she said. I need air. I need to walk. Don't tell me I can't. Short walk, Marcus said. 20 minutes, 30, 25. Fine. She almost smiled. He definitely did. The call with Gloria Reinhold happened at 8:21 that morning. It lasted 1 hour and 4 minutes. Gloria was a woman who had been waiting 7 years to say what she said on that call. When the right people were finally on the line, she said all of it. Her voice was steady throughout. The steadiness of someone who has processed something so many times, it no longer destabilizes them, who has moved the experience from the raw pile to the organized pile, and can now present it with precision. She described her 2017 flight in detail. The verbal provocation that started before takeoff. The escalating comments when she responded calmly. The flight attendant who witnessed it and told her it was a misunderstanding. The complaint she filed at the gate. The 2 follow-up calls she made. The voucher she was offered and declined. The letter that said the matter was closed. I kept everything Gloria said. Every email. Every reference number. Every name I was given. A pause. My husband told me I was holding on to something that was only hurting me. Maybe he was right, but some part of me knew. Another pause. Some part of me knew that one day, someone was going to need it. Nadia pressed her hand flat to her belly. Can I ask you something, she said. Yes. When they closed that complaint. When nothing happened. What did you do with it? How did you carry it? Gloria was quiet for a moment. I put it in a folder. A physical folder in a filing cabinet in my home office. And every time I thought about it, I went and put my hand on that folder. Like it's in here. It's contained. It's real. It still happened. But it's in here. She paused again. Does that make sense? It makes complete sense, Nadia said. Does it? Completely. David requested Gloria's formal statement and copies of every document she had. She said she would send them the same day. She did not hesitate. She had been ready for this call for 7 years. After the call ended, Nadia sat for a moment in the quiet of the hotel room. Then she picked up her phone and opened a blank document. David had offered to write the public statement. She had told him no. "It's my body," she had said. "It's my baby. I write it." He had given her 45 minutes. What she wrote was not angry. That was the first thing Marcus noticed when she handed him the phone to read. Specifically and deliberately not angry. Not because she wasn't, but because she understood that anger, however justified, would become the story. And she intended to be the story. She wrote about the baby shower, about sitting on a flight to New York to see her mother, who had bought 17 things for the nursery already, and her sisters who were arguing about the cake flavors, and all she had wanted was to get there and be surrounded and argue about the cake herself. She wrote about what it means to move through the world in a black woman's body, the arithmetic of courtesy given to people who have not earned it, the math of staying composed in rooms that have decided before you open your mouth who you are and what you deserve. She wrote about saying, "Excuse me" 3 times. She wrote about what happens when no one stops the man who treats your courtesy as permission. She wrote about her daughter, not as a symbol, as a person who was coming, who was already here, already kicking, already decided, who would grow up in a world her mother intended to make answer for something. And at the very end, one sentence, the one she had been composing since the plane banked south. He walked off that plane today, but he will not walk away from what he did. Marcus read it. He looked up. He did not say anything, because there was nothing to say that the look didn't cover. The statement went live at 11:47 that morning. By noon, it had been shared 60,000 times. By 12:30, it had been quoted in full by 5 national outlets. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it was the most read piece of writing about the incident. More than the news reports, more than the analysis pieces, more than anything written by anyone who had not been on that plane. People who read it said in the comments and the reposts that it was the clearest thing they had read about the thing it was describing. Not the clearest thing about airlines or policy or law, the clearest thing about what it costs to be polite when you do not have to be, about what that politeness is worth to the person giving it, and about what happens when the world finally decides it owes that person something back. Brett Calloway entered his guilty plea to federal assault charges on a Thursday morning in Charlotte. Nadia and Marcus were not in the courtroom. They were in Decatur, Georgia. Marcus was on the phone with David when the text came through confirming it was done. He walked into the living room. He sat beside his wife and held the screen where she could see it. She read it. She looked up at the window. "It's done," she said. "It's done," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good." Not triumph, not relief. Something more exact than either of those. The quiet recognition of a woman who chose the version of justice that would last. Not the public confrontation, but the permanent record. Not the dramatic courtroom moment, but the federal conviction that would follow Brett Calloway for the rest of his life and could not be re-argued or retold or revised into something more convenient. She had chosen the version that would still be true 20 years from now when her daughter was old enough to understand what had happened and what had been done about it. Brett Calloway's guilty plea was entered into the federal record on a Thursday. His employer had terminated him the day of the diversion. His platinum memberships were revoked. His attorney's statement contained one sentence and no apology. The federal conviction was permanent. A document in a federal record that said in the language of law that what he did on that plane was a crime. Not ambiguous, not open to reframing. A crime. Officially, irreversibly, forever. He had walked off that plane in Charlotte with a written notice and the belief that the shape of the problem was still manageable. He had been wrong about that in the way that only becomes clear over time as every door closes and every apology arrives too late to matter. Condor Airways, under pressure from its own majority stakeholder and the federal investigation's scrutiny of its crew response records, agreed to a full independent audit of its passenger conduct protocols. Not a press release. a legal condition negotiated by David Reeves with timelines and public accountability requirements written into the settlement. Rosa Alvarez was promoted and asked to join the working group that wrote the new training framework. She accepted. The new policy had no official title in the public documentation. Among the internal team, they called it what it was, the standard that should have existed already. Gloria Reinholdt's 2017 complaint, once buried in a closed file, was attached to the settlement as Exhibit A. The evidence that this was not new, that this was a pattern that had been allowed to continue, and that the airline's failure to act had consequences. Diane Weston, who had enabled and smirked from seat 18A and had told anyone who would listen that the incident had been exaggerated, found that her own name appeared in multiple witness statements. The video, watched by over 3 million people, showed her profile clearly at 2 distinct moments. The Washington Post article named her accurately as a passenger who had actively supported the aggressor. The article used no inflammatory language. It stated what happened. It stated when Diane had spoken and what she had said. The facts were their own consequence. Now, before we get to the ending, this story deserves, I want to ask you something. If you were a witness on that flight, what would you have done? Patricia closed her book. Victor pressed record. Rosa stayed when she could have moved on. Small decisions, permanent weight. Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story has stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because this last part matters most. Nadia went into labor at 2:53 in the morning, 19 days after the flight diverted. It was fast, the way her OB had said it sometimes goes in the 3rd trimester, when a pregnancy has been closely monitored and a woman knows her own body and has been paying attention. Marcus drove them through the ordinary streets of Decatur, through street lights and quiet intersections, and the particular stillness of a city at 3 a.m. None of the ordinary sleeping people in the ordinary houses they passed, knowing that something that mattered was happening in a car moving through their neighborhood. He drove with both hands on the wheel, and Nadia breathing in the passenger seat, her right hand on her belly and the radio off. They did not talk much. They did not need to. They had said what needed to be said. They had done what needed to be done. What came next was not something that could be prepared for with notes or documentation or legal strategy. What came next was simply arrival. The baby was born at 6:18 in the morning. She was 7 pounds and 4 ounces. She arrived loud, which the nurses said with genuine warmth was the very best sign. She had strong lungs and strong opinions, and she announced both of these things the moment she was present in the room. She was placed on Nadia's chest before she had entirely finished arriving, still deciding, it seemed, whether she intended to be here, and then definitively deciding that she did. Nadia looked at her. She looked at this small, complete, furious person on her chest, and her face did something that Marcus, standing beside them, had never seen it do. Not the composed face, not the strategic face, not the careful, measured face she wore in meetings or courtrooms or in the cabin of a plane at 30,000 feet when her body absorbed a shock it was not designed to absorb. Not even the fully human face he had seen in the hotel room in Charlotte when the medical technician said the baby was okay, and the composure finally cracked. This was something else, something that existed before language, something that had no name except the oldest one. Love undiluted, in its original form, the kind that does not yet know the world is complicated and does not need to. The kind that exists before the cost of it is understood. The kind that a person carries for the rest of their life, and that makes the cost when it comes completely and absolutely worth it. "Hi," Nadia said. Just that. The word she would use for the rest of her life when this girl walked into a room. The word that would be the first thing her daughter heard from the first person who loved her. "Hi." Marcus stood beside them. His hands were shaking slightly, which surprised him. He had been steady all morning through the drive and the check-in and the waiting and all the procedural motions of becoming a father in a hospital on an October morning. His hands were steady for all of it. They were shaking now. He did not try to stop them. They named her Imani, which means faith, which is what Nadia had at 30,000 feet when she pressed both hands to her belly and breathed, which is what Marcus had when he stood between his wife and a man who had decided she was not worth basic human dignity, and held his hands open at his sides and spoke without shouting, and built a structure around the hardest moment of his life, and stood inside it until the ground held, which is what Rosa Alvarez carried with her when she decided to stay, which is what every person who said I saw it and meant it chose in their own specific way on that particular October morning on Condor Airways Flight 1847. Faith that the truth assembled carefully and stated clearly is stronger than the lie told confidently. Faith that the record matters, that the document matters, that the federal conviction matters, that the changed policy matters, that the name of the woman who said, "Excuse me," 3 times matters, and the name of the woman who filed a complaint 7 years ago and kept it in a folder matters, and the name of the coach who pressed record when something felt wrong matters. Faith that small decisions made by ordinary people in hard moments add up to something permanent. Imani Okafor came into the world 12 days after her mother's statement was quoted in a federal proceeding. She came into a world that her mother had refused to leave unchanged. She was 3 hours old when Marcus took the first photo of her and sent it to David, who responded in 11 seconds with a single line. She looks like someone who knows exactly where she belongs. She will grow up knowing what happened on that flight. Not as a weight, not as a wound, as an inheritance. The story of a woman who was hit and did not fall, who was silenced and spoke anyway, who sat in the middle of a cruelty that the world had been practicing for a very long time and decided clearly and without drama that it stopped here. With her. With this. Somewhere in Charlotte, Brett Calloway had a federal conviction and a career that no longer existed, and a permanent record that followed him everywhere he walked. He had walked off that plane thinking he had won something. He had won nothing. He had given Imani Okafor's mother a reason to make sure her daughter never had to fight the same fight in the same way. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. He thought he had made her small. He had made her permanent. And the world will know her daughter's name long after it has forgotten his. If this story stayed with you, please share it right now. Not for the views, but for the person in your life who needs to hear that quiet strength is not weakness. It is the most powerful thing in the world. If you watched all the way to the end, hit that like button. It means more than you know, and it helps this story reach more people who need it. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. And leave a comment below telling me what part of this story hit you the hardest. Was it the kick? Was it Marcus standing up with his hands open? Was it Nadia saying "excuse me" 3 times? Was it baby Imani arriving into a world her mother refused to leave unchanged? Tell me. I want to know. Until next time, stay. Just stay kind and never let anyone make you feel like you do not belong exactly where you are.